Hey guys, welcome back to Minecraft The Lost Journals. Today we're reading chapter 23. It's titled New Uses for Cursed Armor. Starts on page 215 and goes to page 224. If you guys have enjoyed this novel so far, make sure you hit that subscribe button for more Minecraft The Lost Journals. Without further ado, chapter 23. Journal entry. I am out of supplies. Think about the items I have left behind me. I have left behind me in a various domicile in the nether, and I regret leaving so much behind. But a person can carry only so much, both physically and emotionally. I fear I am at my end now. If my final journals are found, please tell my family that I am sorry for the mistakes I've made. And tell the girl Freya I regret not taking her up on her hospitality. And tell Boots she was right about most things anyway. How I ended up in the one room surrounded by mobs is embarrassing to say the least. But if I'm found this way, there will be questions. I have discovered a fortress I would like to inhabit, but I needed some supplies, and found an ancient, crumbling structure nearby. I became greedy and wanted to search for specific items not found in my new home. I grew tired and built myself a single room to rest in safely. I built my room close to a crumbling wall, with hopes that the wall would add more protection, but it seems I didn't notice a nearby mob spawner. I took a quick rest, and when I peeked outside, I was surrounded by enemies. I'm trapped. I came here with a few weapons, considerable amounts of leather, a few crafting tables, and some food, but my weapons have all broken by now. They lie littered around me. I began crafting leather armor with the intent to curse them. Cursing. How did I miss this in all my studies? I thought I was placing an enchantment building on my item so that I would further bind an enchantment, and instead I was cursing them with the inability to remove the item until it broke. I've left cursed armor in my wake throughout the nether until I realized what I was doing. Now I'm doing it to save my life. I can place a cursed helmet backward on Skeleton's head, and it will wander away in confusion. I've tried to give the banners to carry, to perhaps alert someone to my presence, but I haven't seen another soul in some time, and there are always more skeletons. I'm keeping them from attacking me, but I am nearly out of leather. I ran out of food yesterday. The mobs just keep coming. Bunny Biter was there, barking furiously at a skeleton carrying a blue banner. When Max and Freya found the dark corner where the monsters were coming from, nestled in the alley between a newer simple one room building and a crumbling wall. The wolf had dropped, or eaten, the skeleton leg along the way, and looked to be searching for another snack. She'd dart in, nip at the skeleton heels, and then dart out, barking. She seemed confused by the skeleton's inability to attack directly, and thought barking was the safest bet. When her mistress called her, she perked her head up immediately and teleported to Freya's side. Freya took a moment to kneel and hug her wolf, whose tail was wagging furiously, and then she stood. The blinded monsters milled about outside the small building, some looking in windows as if they didn't have a helmet stuck the wrong way on their heads, others wandering away in confusion. I'm betting your uncle is inside there, Freya said, pointing. Do you think you and Bunny Biter can take care of these skeletons out here while I clear the mobs by the path to the door? Max asked. Freya gave him a withering look. Do you really need to ask? She winked at him. Bunny Biter. Sick tibia. Sick tibia, she called to the wolf, who was immediately off again, aiming for the nearest skeleton leg. Freya raised her bow and began losing arrows, one after another. Max took a moment to admire her, wondering how long he and Allison could have lasted in the nether without their new friend. Then he ran in a wide arc around the little shelter, avoiding the mobs and looking for their source. He saw immediately that the shack was built amid the ruins of a crumbling fortress. This one had to have been here much longer than the others he had noticed, as if it had no roof and more walls than not were skeletal representations of their old strength. But monsters could still spawn in this old fortress, and they were doing so with a vengeance. His pack contained his good armor, just in case he found a way to lose the cursed items, some food, a few minor pieces of loot picked up from the skeletons, and the diamond pickaxe Allison had made for him. He stashed his diamond sword and gripped the pickaxe. He had to clear out the monsters and get some torches on the wall to make this area safer. He just needed to trust that Freya and Bunny Biter would do their part of the job. Max put down some blocks in another rack and climbed to a ledge at the mouth of the alley where he could see the entryway into the small building. From his vantage point, he saw with a pang of regret the vast expanse of the fortress. It must have been truly amazing when it was whole. Now it was just a dangerous ruin. He gave a thought as to what his mom would say if she were here, and he grinned sadly. He missed even her yelling at him. He wished Allison could see him now. He was being careful. He crept a few blocks forward until he was looking down on the milling skeletons, thickest in the dark alley between the newer building and the crumbling fortress wall. A few options ran through his mind. He could try to build a walkway above the mobs and all the way over to the door. He could try to stick a few torches on the walls to drive them out of the alley, or he could fire down a few arrows from his hiding place and pick them off here. Each plan had its pros and cons, but before he could decide, one skeleton finally noticed him and shot an arrow in his direction. Max abandoned his method of careful planning and jumped straight down into the fray of skeletons, whooping and swinging his sword with his right hand. With his left, he waved a torch around until he saw an opening and stuck it to the wall. Bunny Biter snarled behind him, and he heard clacking as another skeleton went down. His diamond sword bit into the skeleton after skeleton, severing skulls and whacking swords out of bony hands. He was in a brightly lit area now, and the skeletons were starting to run from the wolf. Something punched him from behind, and he stumbled forward in surprise, whirling to see a skeleton that had snuck up behind him. It waved its sword at him, and Max raised his own sword too, slowly, his arm aching. Behind the skeleton, the shelter wall crumbled as the tip of a pickaxe came through the loose stone. The skeleton's blank face disappeared behind the leather helmet. It staggered forward, suddenly unable to see. Max took the opportunity and gave a mighty swing of his sword, felling the skeleton. Max, said a strangled voice from the darkness of the building's interior, but Max didn't waste time. He put the remaining torches and made sure no more skeletons were coming from any dark corners. Then he turned, breathing hard, and grinned at the figure looking at the hole in the wall. "Hey, Uncle Nicholas, ready to go home?" Max was enveloped in a hug so tight he couldn't breathe, and he had a bizarre flashback to when he was drowning. But thankfully, his uncle let him go. Nicholas pulled him tight, pulled him through the hole he'd made in the wall, and quickly patched it back up. "Max! How? Why? When?" He was unable to get anything out. Max just grinned at him. "Is there room for two more in there?" The door opened on the other side of the room, making them both jump. Freya and Bunny Biter came in. "Freya!" Nicholas seemed even more baffled to see her. "What's going on here? How do you know each other?" "First, are you okay? Injured or anything?" Max asked. His uncle looked like he could use a comb and bath, but otherwise seemed whole and healthy. "I'm fine, but—" He looked from Max to Freya, confusion and delight warring on his face. Max began to give him an account of everything that had happened, starting with the drowning and discovering Nicholas's cabin, and then Allison and I went back home, and— "Wait," Nicholas said. "Allison is living with you?" "Oh yeah, I forgot that part," Max said, glad that Allison wasn't there to see him squirm over the fact that he'd forgotten about her family. Soon after you left, her house was destroyed by a creeper. She's the only one left. Nicholas looked like he had been struck in the chest. He staggered backward, stunned, and leaned against the wall. Max remembered that he and Allison's grandma had once been friends. Everyone? Nicholas asked. Even Dia? They didn't find anyone after the explosion, except Allison, Max said softly. So Mom invited her to move in with us. Nicholas rubbed his face and sighed, looking very sad, and then returned from whatever nostalgia he had been visiting. Go on, he finally said. Max told the story of the second creeper attack, the chicken jockey attack, Freya's rescue, and how they had hunted for him. Hey, I have a question. Why did you put a bunch of mobs in a glass box? Freya asked him. Seemed like a good idea at the time, Nicholas said. I built three sides, then lured them over there. Inside is a trap door that I escaped from. It kept me busy making the island safe, but then the mobs would still spawn. It was a waste of time. Max finished the table of their adventures with leaving Allison at the fortress and coming to find him. And now we can take you back and figure out a way to get a portal home. Nicholas sobered up. I don't know. Your mom made it pretty clear she didn't want me back. Then move to another house. One that isn't in the village, Freya said. There are a lot of places that aren't the nether. You don't have to live in this desolate place. Max cocked an eyebrow at her. I thought you had chosen to live in this desolate place. Freya grinned and shrugged. Allison reminded me that I missed the color green. Both enchanters had wanted to explore the crumbled fortress because of the treasures that could be inside, but Freya reminded them that Allison was alone and waiting for them. On the way back, Max asked Nicholas why he was so upset about Allison's family. I mean, I was sad too, but you took it personally. Nicholas sighed. It was a long time ago. She never wanted us to tell you. Many years ago. Allison's grandma Dia, her grandpa Robert, and I were close friends. Robert had no taste for adventure, though he wanted to stay home and keep his animals safe. Dia had a strong curiosity about, but also an aversion for danger. So she came with me, but complained the whole time. He smiled fondly at the memory. She didn't want to admit she enjoyed it, but I would craft items and make our shelters, and she would enchant the items and do whatever alchemy we needed. She hated visiting the Nether, though, but went because she said she had to keep me out of trouble. Max listened, his mouth hanging open. He was dimly aware of Freya scanning their surroundings for monsters as he stared at his uncle. Are you serious? He nodded sadly. I called her Boots because that's what her last name meant. We stopped adventuring when she started a family and she became very maternal, not wanting any of her kids to explore the same places she had. One more time, when her children were young, she and I went to the Nether. Her leg was badly injured in a wither skeleton attack, and I got her back home. She made a full recovery, but from then on, she would have nothing to do with the Nether, and made me and Allison's grandfather swear never to tell the families what we had been up to in our youth. He grinned down at Max. Looks like it didn't matter anyway, since you and Allison are doing exactly what we had done. Max winced. So that's why Grandma Dia limped? Nicholas shook his head. That was just age catching up with her. I told her that was the case. But she didn't like that very much and decided to blame me. Even though I was the one who fought the skeleton off her, still she wouldn't have been in the Nether if it weren't for me. If she knew you two were here right now, she would be an avenging angel, limp or no limp, coming to find you two. Max laughed, picturing Dia swooping in to save and scold them, then grimaced. You and I might be too similar, actually. He told Nicholas the story of the cursed armor, both the armor he himself had cursed, and the faulty armor he had looted from Nicholas's house. Nicholas grasped his shoulders. Oh, my boy, you were not to follow in my footsteps. My footsteps are weighed down by cursed boots and fermented spider eyes. His eyebrows came together, making his face look like a thundercloud, reminding Max forcefully of his mother. They looked very much alike right then. Then Nicholas relaxed and was himself again. I'm so grateful you're alive. Just promise me you're learning from my mistakes. Max thought about the failed experiments. I'm learning from yours and mine, yeah, as long as you're learning and alive. But my enchantments work. Sometimes, Max added, and I'm learning more and more. That is more than I can say, sadly. Right now, the only thing I've achieved is a new use for cursed armor. I'm amazed you've managed to make some items that were successfully enchanted. Nicholas inspected Frey's boots. Did you enchant these? Oh, yeah, among a bunch of failures. Well, that's how you learn, Nicholas said, delighted. You learn all the ways to not do something, then you find the way to do it. I found many, many ways not to enchant armor. I just recently learned that the step one is not to curse the armor with binding. I will eventually figure out step two. Until then, you have a unique business model, Freya suggested. Just, I am one of Nicholas' cursed caps on the heads of any mob following you, and they will be unable to get it off, leaving you and your family safe and secure. Nicholas thought for a moment. That might work, actually. Max swallowed, nervous all of a sudden. Then does that mean you're coming home with us? His uncle's face darkened again. The overworld doesn't have Dia in it. We were good friends. But it does have Mom, and me, and Allison, Max said, hurt. Nicholas smiled and hugged Max. True. Let's get to safety, and we can talk more. That wraps up that chapter. I hope that you guys enjoyed. And if you did, hit that like button, and I will see you next time.